Hey everybody, it is You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week, my first question comes from Jay Wendt, who says, "Hi Steve, I have a question about atheism I'm hoping you can answer for your video. Now, when I ask this, please remember I'm on your side, but think it's important to ask the skeptical questions to help understand my own viewpoints. Here goes. If atheism is grounded in reason, logic, hard science, and facts, then in your opinion, why are there still so many highly intelligent, educated, well-read, grounded people in the world who still believe in a Christian God and the religion of Christianity? I'm talking about college-educated people, professors, scientists, doctors, lawyers, government leaders, world leaders, military leaders, our presidents, writers, artists, the list goes on. How can an atheist look at all these highly educated, reasoned, intelligent people and not wonder how it is they still drink the Kool-Aid? Do these people truly know something we atheists just aren't getting? Isn't religion supposed to be for the weak-minded and credulous? At the very least, you'd think every scientist on Earth would be an atheist, but they are not. I know you can't speak for the world, Steve, but I just want your thoughts on why, in this age of reason and science, there aren't more outed atheists. And wouldn't it be great if we elected a president someday who, after a week in office, came out as an atheist? Imagine how that would shake the core of our country's Christian elite. I'd love to see it. Thank you. Well, thank you, Jay. Your question brings up a lot of interesting points, a few of which I've touched on here and there over the years in my videos. One of which is, you're absolutely right, many highly intelligent, educated, rational people are religious people, are Christians or religiously Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever. Just because you are a religious person, and even a very devoutly religious person, that does not mean that you in general are an irrational or a delusional person. And sometimes we atheists, and I would include myself in this from time to time, although I don't think I'm as bad as some others, in fairness, but we atheists occasionally are guilty of reducing religious folks to that stereotype, that they're all just delusional, credulous rubes, and they've all been taken in by religion, and they're not of particular intelligence or education. And that's not true. But why is that not true? If we atheists have got it right, and if atheism is the most reasonable position to hold in regards to the existence of gods, why is it that so many reasonable, rational people hold the opposite position, and in fact very specific forms of the opposite position? Well, one thing I think that is very important for us to always remember is that reason is not math. A rational mind will not always come to the exact same conclusion as another rational mind. Two people can look at a particular problem or a particular phenomenon, a particular situation, and they can examine it and judge it completely rationally, completely sanely and skeptically and rationally, and still come to different, even opposing conclusions. Sometimes a person can have all the facts you have and be just as reasonable and rational as you and just come to a different conclusion. And I think in the case of really educated, rational, erudite religious folks, that is what is going on. I know people myself who I consider incredibly intelligent people, way smarter than I am, way more rational and level-headed and than I am, and they are religious people. They're deeply, devoutly religious, and that's just the way it works. There's more than one conclusion you can get to and still be rational. Now, I think they're wrong. I think if you use your reason to come to the conclusion that there is a God, I think that's the wrong answer. But that doesn't mean that one of us is irrational. McKenna Coughlan, I wanted to start off by saying I have quite enjoyed your videos speaking out about equal rights, feminism. I've got to admit, I got quite a bit of amusement from watching people in the comments hear one part out of your entire video and ignore the rest while writing what could be equated to an angrily written master's thesis. I do want to ask, though, what are your views on transsexual, transgender people? I've seen both sides make comments about how TS people should remain with their same sex they were born with, and even if they change it physically, they are still the sex they were born as. An example would be how a trans-exclusionary radical feminist informed me that even though I came out as a TS male, no matter what, I will forever be female. And that is the only reason I am relevant to feminism. Had some MRAs, the same thing. Do you view a transsexual, transgender person as the sex they were born with, or the gender they identify as? I think transgender people should be treated as and referred to as the gender they identify as. Personally, I don't think it's any of my business, and I don't see any reason why I should care what anatomical gender a person is if they identify as another gender. I just don't see why it's important. And that is an attitude that has actually changed for me in the last few years, and that is really changing in our society and in our culture. And I think that's a good thing. I think the whole idea that gender is not locked in when you are born, and that it does not necessarily have to be rigidly defined as your anatomical gender, is a very new idea, at least in our culture, and something that we are slowly becoming used to and beginning to embrace. And I think that's a good thing. My attitude is that life cannot be easy in our culture, in our very gender binary, manly man, girlish girl culture, where we define each other sexually by our anatomical sex and by our traditional gender roles. It cannot be easy at all to be a transgender person in this culture. I think it's easier now than it was maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but it's still, I can't imagine it's an easy thing to do. And I can imagine there are all kinds of stress that a transgender person has to deal with that I just have no concept of. So anything I can do as a cisgendered person, as a normal, boring, white heterosexual male, to make life easier for transgender people, I feel like it's the least I can do. And if you identify as a woman but you are anatomically male, or you identify as a male but you're anatomically female, to me, that doesn't matter to me at all. I don't care. Whatever you identify as, whatever you feel like you are, then to me, that's what you are. And I think once more people get that through their head and understand that it's not actually your job to adjudicate what someone else's gender is, that you should take people as you find them and you should treat people the way they wish you to treat them, I think we'll all be a lot better off. October K. Dear Steve, first of all, I'd like to thank you. My mother found out she had throat cancer, and while we fought the cancer, I started showing her your videos. Her favorite videos were Steve and Stuffy. I also make up stories with my teddy bears and hope to one day write a book. She loved that there are other adult males who did this. Sadly, my mother lost her battle with cancer on September 1st, so I'd like to say thank you for putting a smile on her face during those dark days. Also, I've been meaning to ask, what's your thoughts on mind over matter? Example, I'm goth and I wear a black leather trench coat all year, no matter the weather. I've trained my body to not be hot during the summer. Most of my friends think you can't train your body to do that. What are your thoughts? Thanks for reading. October. I'm very, very sorry to hear about your mother, and I appreciate you saying that to me and telling me that she enjoyed my videos. That means a lot to me. That's a very humbling thing to hear. I'm glad that they were of some use in that situation, and again, I'm very, very sorry. Mind over matter, I don't know. I mean, a lot of mind over matter strikes me as just the body's ability to get used to things. Like when you say that you've trained yourself to not get hot when you wear your trench coat in the summer, that might just be your body making an adjustment to typical conditions. You know, you wear the trench coat in hot weather a lot, so you just adjust and become more comfortable. What?
Have you ever heard of Wim Hof?
Wim Hof. No.
He's the guy who can endure cold temperatures. Wikipedia says, on the 18th of April, Hof got the test results regarding, quote, the influence of concentration and meditation on autonomic nervous system activity and the innate immune response, case study, demonstrating that he is able to directly influence his own autonomic nervous system and immune system. Hof seems to be able to raise his cortisol levels and lower the amount of cytokines, inflammatory bodies, just by using his meditation techniques.
What's his name again?
Wim, W-I-M, Hof,
Hof.
H-O-F.
Well, there you go. Wim Hof, mind over matter.
For real.
For real.
I mean, apparently his body temperature doesn't change when he's immersed into freezing water for like an hour at a time. He doesn't. It's not just like he's.
Like there's physical things happening.
Yeah, like his body actually does not change, does not lower its temperature. He's not just mentally overcoming the cold.
Right. He's actually changing his physical or maintaining a particular physical.
Well,
there you go, October. Tell your friends who don't believe that you can adjust in your black trench coat to look up Wim Hof. Next, Kerouac. Hey, Steve. I really think the name Millicent is a beautiful name. Did your husky doll come up with that name, or did she get her name after you got her? I would have asked Millicent herself, but I don't think she would have answered truthfully. I also love the voices you do for your animals. How long have you been doing voice acting? I recently watched a Bible Reloaded episode where you are a guest for one of their Chick Tract episodes, and you did a couple unique voices on there. I especially liked the older lady. How many different voices do you have? Firstly, Millicent was named by my wife, Ashley. Ashley named her on the drive back from the toy store where we purchased her. And in fact, but there's about maybe a 20-25 minute drive from the toy store to our house, and in that space Ashley had invented not only her name but pretty much her entire personality, her backstory, everything. The Millicent character, pretty much as you see her in the videos, was created by my incredibly imaginative and talented wife on the drive home from getting the dog. So as for the rest of your question, which I have completely forgotten. Ah, yes, the voices. I don't really think of myself as a voice actor. I mean, I guess I kind of am with the Steve and Stuffy videos, but I don't really think of myself that way. The voices come from just playing with the animals and giving them personalities and giving them voices, and I mean, not wanting them to sound exactly like myself. So you want to be able to have them go back and forth. It's just an example, a result of imagination and play. And I did that when I was a little kid too. I would have action figures and, give them different voices. Like if I had a Batman figure, I'd have him talk like Batman. And, if I had, a different character, he would talk in a different voice. And I don't know how many voices I have. I don't keep track. I make them up as I need them. Skull Marus, I have a question for you. In your dog versus dog episode, Toby expressed the sentiment that merely looking at the leaked pictures was wrong. Do you, Steve, personally agree? I can see it as rude or tacky, but have trouble actually labeling merely looking at something as morally wrong. It is also virtually impossible to avoid. I can't walk down the checkout aisle at the grocery store without seeing dozens of embarrassing, unauthorized celebrity photos on the cover of every magazine. I think there needs to be a distinction drawn between unauthorized celebrity candid pictures and the pictures that were leaked. Because the pictures that were leaked were not snapped by paparazzi while people were walking down the street. They were personal, private pictures that were stolen and released completely without authorization. Although, if you want to bring up paparazzi, I'm not too crazy about those guys either. I think what they do is not the same, is not as egregious as hacking into someone's private account and taking their personal shit and throwing it out there for all to see. But at the same time, I don't have a particularly high opinion of them, and I do think there is something invasive. Even if you are a celebrity, even if you know you're going to get recognized when you go out to the grocery store, you're going to a club or to a premiere. I mean, even though you do have an expectation that people are going to notice you and maybe somebody will want to take your picture, I still think it's a very invasive, intrusive thing to just, oh, look, there's, who's name a celebrity? Who's like a famous person?
Your mom.
I do think it's wrong to look at the pictures. It's not as wrong as stealing the pictures yourself. It's not as wrong as putting them out there. You are taking part in the invasion of that person's privacy. And that's wrong. I don't think you need to be hung in the public square for it. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but I certainly don't think that it's morally acceptable. Super Librarian. Hi, Steve. I finally thought of a worthy question to ask you. In honor of National Banned Books Week, September 21st through 27th, 2014, what are your thoughts on censorship? from muting certain lyrics in music to removing books from schools and libraries, do you find any acceptable reason for certain censorship, or do you consider all forms of censorship equal violations of our First Amendment rights? Thanks for the consideration, Meg. P.S. Can I get some internet love for banned and challenged books? Thanks. I oppose censorship with just a few tiny exceptions, and they're the same exceptions that are usually made for the First Amendment in general, freedom of speech. I mean, I think it's okay to censor material that is found to be, inciting to violence or slanderous, that sort of thing. But other than that, I am not in favor of censoring material at all. I think that ratings or maybe descriptions that identify content contained in a particular work are fine. I don't really have much use for them personally, but I know a lot of people, especially parents, like to know what's in a movie before they decide whether or not to let their kids see it or watch it as a family or whatever. So I think rating systems or some sort of content advisories are a better way to handle things than flat out censorship saying, you can't listen to this, you can't read this, you can't watch this, or this sort of thing is not, you can't even make it. Like telling, having certain words that you can't say on television, or bleeping out certain words in songs on the radio, like you said in your question. I just don't get that. I think artists should be allowed to make whatever kind of art they feel like making. And obviously there are marketplace considerations. I mean, you might be making a movie for a TV network, and your network executives might say, well, you can't have this, and you can't have this, and you can't have this. That to me is a private matter. In terms of government censorship and First Amendment freedom of speech issues, I'm just not a big censorship guy. I think content advisories and telling people what is in something is a much better way to go. To say something before the thunderclap. You were going to say something?
Well, no, I mean, you say content advisories, like for books. But think about, okay, for example, the Scarlet Letter, which you and I both read for
in school
in 11th grade. Think about if that had a content advisory. It has adultery, it has out of wedlock pregnancy, it has defying the church. I mean, imagine if all of that came home to a parent and they didn't even know the title. Do you think most people in our hometown would have said, oh yeah, okay, that's so I don't know about the content advisory.
Because you think describing the content flatly like that would scare people off. They think, I don't want to read a book that's got adultery in it.
Right. Or,
well, I mean, it would be nice if people were just mature enough to read a book and just,
I mean, I'm not saying, that their kid, they don't want their kid, they feel like that's too adult a theme for them. And then
a parent,
it's like, oh yeah, by the way, it's the Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel.
Right, it's a classic. It's part of the American literary canon. My ideal situation is just not to have any of it and say, you know what, we're all fucking adults, and those of us who are children hopefully have parents or guardians to exercise discretion on our behalf, and let's just let's just watch what's on TV, and let's watch what's in the movie, and if it's something that is offensive to us, let's just be grown up enough to fucking live with it, and not treat it as like some horrible thing. That's my ideal situation, but that's not the situation in which we find ourselves.
Alright, anyway, I was wondering.
You remember when there was that thunder sound effect a few minutes ago? Yeah. Well, that signified that. That meant that it was time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Radical Bacon. Hey Steve, can you rub Audie's belly, or is it a death trap? It depends on Audie's mood. And sometimes the mood changes mid-belly rub. Sometimes she will roll over on her back and it's like, oh, rub my belly. And then you rub it 3 or 4 times and all of a sudden she goes into the fucking death clench. Which only with me. Which has its own particular charms, I find. Der Wunderbar, congrats with the 100 you had to ask. What do you think about Shakespeare? In high school and before I went back to college, I was not a big Shakespeare fan, but I have come around on him a lot. Now I think of Shakespeare as a wonderful poet and a great user of language, but I'm still not nuts about him as a storyteller. I still have problems with Shakespeare as with his plots and with his storytelling, but his writing, his style, his language is beautiful, I think. Ted Meadows, YouTube deathmatch, Stuffy versus Creationist Cat. Who wins? Stuffy wins, but not on his own merit. Stuffy would refuse to fight, but he would have Toby Benson watching his back. Because for all his flaws, Toby is very loyal, and Toby would make sure that Stuffy got out of that alive. Jen Virtue, hi Steve. Lightning round question. Which one, the Twilight Zone or the Outer Limits? Oh, Twilight Zone. As much as I have appreciation and respect for the Outer Limits, to me the Twilight Zone is, that's, one of my favorite shows ever. It stands head and shoulders above all the other anthology shows, I think. Mark Norton, at 9 minutes and 6 seconds of the last video, Audie notices Millicent. Then there was a cut. Did Audie do something to Millicent? How do you know Millicent didn't do something to Audie? Maybe that's why I cut it out. Do not underestimate Millicent. She definitely has a aggressive side. Solar Dragon 007. Hey Steve, I think you missed this question this week, so here it is again. With this being the 30th anniversary year of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and there being so many iterations over the years, I couldn't help but wonder, do you have any affection for the Turtles? I personally was never into the cartoon, but I did enjoy the original comic books by Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman. I never read the comics to this day. I still have never read the Ninja Turtle comics. I was never a huge fan of them when I was younger. My brother was. My brother is about 5 years younger than I am, and he went through a big Ninja Turtles phase when he was about 5, 6 years old, something like that. And so we had turtle stuff in the house, but it was mostly his, not mine. I remember watching the first movie when I was at the outdoor school. In our school district, we have an outdoor school where it's like a little mini summer camp that you go to for like a week when you're in 4th or 5th grade. And you stay in bunk beds and you go fishing and you go hiking in the woods, and it was just an awesome experience. And I remember one night in the main building, we watched the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie as a treat, and everybody thought it was awesome when Raphael said, "Damn!" It's like, we're getting to watch a movie with cursing in it. So that's my memory of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mead Hands. Hey Steve, I can't remember if you've ever addressed this, but are there any atheist podcasts you listen to and or have shouted out? I've only recently gotten back into podcasts with the Scathing Atheist, Cognitive Dissonance, the Reasonable Doubts podcast, No Religion Required, and This Is What Atheists Believe. That may seem like a lot, but I am always looking for more. Do you have any other suggestions to tack on? Or maybe you just want to take this opportunity to condemn some of the listed casts. Either route would be acceptable and appreciated. Wow, you really do you really do like podcasts, don't you? That's a hell of a lot. Most of the podcasts I listen to personally are professional wrestling related, so no help there. But in terms of atheist podcasts, my favorite is Seth Andrews' The Thinking Atheist. To me, that's the gold standard. I would also recommend two other ones that are not necessarily atheist related, but are produced by atheists and guys who are friends of mine. The first one is Dick Coughlan's Left Wing Propaganda podcast. Dick's one of my pals and one of my favorite fellow YouTube atheists. His podcast isn't exclusively atheist stuff. It's more like news and commentary and comedy. And if you listen, you might occasionally hear a commentary submitted by yours truly. So there's a reason to check out the Left Wing Propaganda podcast. But that's a good one. And also Jason Harding, a.k.a. Jason with a D, and Atticus Blake, a.k.a. Finite Atticus. Also wonderful, sterling members of our YouTube atheist community and pals of mine have a podcast that they do called Lemme Finish. That again has nothing to do with atheism itself. It's more of a comedy storytelling podcast, but it is awesome, and you should check that one out too. So those would be my two recommendations: Dick Coughlan's Left Wing Propaganda podcast and Jason and Atticus's Lemme Finish podcast. You should Google both of those and find them because they're both very, very well worth your time. Super Steelers Fan 100. Hey Steve, so there is this girl I like, but she smokes weed and I am extremely straight edge. What should I do? Does the girl like you? Do you think you could get along? Can you live with her smoking weed and you not smoking it? I mean, if you really like her and she likes you and there's like chemistry there, then maybe you should just get over the fact that she smokes weed. and just, go out with her and have a good time. That would be my advice. I mean, I don't know, how straight edge are you? Do you need other people to be straight edge too? Or is it cool if you're just straight edge? I think that's the decision. That's the judgment you have to make there. Nuno Uno 001. Where were you on September 11th, 2001? I was actually at the apartment of my now ex-girlfriend, and we had been planning actually to drive to Canada to go to the Toronto Film Festival, which obviously ended up not happening. And in retrospect, it was good that it didn't happen because it was kind of a half-baked plan anyway. Like, we didn't have hotel accommodations signed up. We didn't know what movies we were going to see. It was a really half-baked, half-assed plan that honestly we might have ended up not doing anyway, even without the 9/11 attacks. But that's where I was. I was in Pennsylvania preparing to drive later that day up to Toronto to see about the last week of the Toronto Film Festival that year, which did not happen. Matt 77 Christian. Hello, Steve. Quick evolution topic question. To Christians who deny or question evolution, aren't we, humans, a blatant example? If God created us in his image, wouldn't we keep that same look, whatever that is, no matter where we lived? Humans have obviously taken on drastic trait changes based on the environment we live in. So isn't that the most obvious evidence of evolution? Thoughts? Well, to me that would be evidence for evolution, but remember that many creationists, many Christian folks who question evolution insist that there is a difference between microevolution and macroevolution. Now, I don't recognize that as being a meaningful distinction. It's just a way of describing evolution at different scales. The process of microevolution is really no different than the process of macroevolution. There's no barrier to stop microevolution from bringing about results at the macroevolutionary level. But remember who your opponents are in this debate. Remember who you're talking to. Many of these folks will insist that changes in traits in humans, different races, different body types, different, the various diversity that we see in the different human beings is just an example of microevolution and not macroevolution. So I would bet that would be an answer you would get if you would bring that up. Hey, that is it. That was the last question. That's it for the questions this week. Before I get out of here, I want to do a shout out, as I always do. And the shout out this week is another one of these that is really long overdue that I probably should have given a while ago. And it is to Ryan Wiley. Ryan Wiley has an awesome YouTube channel. He is, like me, a liberal. He's a dirty, filthy leftist. And he makes YouTube videos commenting on things, commenting on politics. He's a great one for commenting, challenging and arguing against things like the men's rights movement. He's a great advocate for progressivism, for social equality. Awesome channel. I don't understand why he doesn't have 10 times as many subs as he has, but I think his channel is great. And I think his work is very valuable and very worth checking out. If you don't know who I'm talking about, go to Ryan Wiley's YouTube page and check it out. And if it's your type of thing, throw him a subscription because he deserves it. That's the shout out this week. Well, that is it for this week. I will be back again next week to do this all over again, provided, of course, that you guys ask me some questions. Because in order for me to do this, you have to ask. So leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. Ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. And I will answer as many of them as I possibly can. So, until next time, I'll see you everybody. Take care.